You're about to discover something that will completely shift how you see reality. What I'm going to share with you isn't New Age fluff or ancient mysticism. It's an understanding that's been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. And suddenly, in our digital age, it's becoming impossible to ignore. Picture this. 3,000 years ago, someone figured out the blueprint of how everything actually works. Not just the physical world, but consciousness, relationships, success, failure. Why some people seem to attract everything they want while others struggle endlessly. This knowledge got locked away, passed down through secret schools, wrapped in symbols and cryptic language that most people couldn't decode. They called it Hermeticism. And here's what's wild. Every single thing happening in your life right now, every breakthrough in science, every pattern you see in social media, every coincidence that makes you pause and wonder, it all follows the exact same principles that were written down when people were still figuring out. Fire. Think about your phone for a moment. You tap the screen and instantly you're connected to someone on the other side of the planet. Information flows, images appear. Your thoughts become reality through your fingertips. That's not magic, right? That's just how things work now. But 3,000 years ago, if you told someone you could speak to anyone, anywhere instantly, show them moving pictures, access all human knowledge with a single touch, they'd call it magic. Here's the thing though. The principles that make your phone work, that make the internet possible, that allow information to flow instantly across the globe. These are the exact same principles the Hermetic masters were talking about. They just didn't have our language for it. What if I told you that your consciousness works exactly like a network? That your thoughts are broadcasting on specific frequencies, that the reality you experience is being shaped by the same laws that govern how information moves through digital space. What if the reason you keep seeing the same number sequences, meeting the right people at the right time, or having thoughts that suddenly manifest in your physical world isn't coincidence at all? You see, we're living in the first era in human history where the invisible has become visible. We can actually see information traveling. We can watch networks form and dissolve. We can observe how individual nodes influence entire systems. We're witnessing the mechanics of manifestation happening in real time every single day. When you post something online and it goes viral, that's not random. When certain content reaches you at exactly the moment you need to see it, that's not the algorithm. Well, it is the algorithm, but the algorithm is just following laws that are way older than computers. The ancient Hermetic masters called it correspondence. As above, so below. As in the digital realm, so in physical reality. Your social media feed is a perfect mirror of your internal state. The people who appear in your life are reflecting back your own frequency. The opportunities that show up, the obstacles you encounter, the information that finds its way to you, it's all following the same pattern recognition that's been running this reality since the beginning. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people are still operating like reality is something that happens to them. They're passive receivers, scrolling through life, reacting to whatever shows up on their screen. They don't realize they're the ones programming the experience. The Hermetic Masters understood something we're just starting to remember. Consciousness isn't produced by your brain. Consciousness is the field that your brain is operating within. You're not in the universe. The universe is in you. You're not receiving reality. You're broadcasting it. Every thought is a search query. Every emotion is a filter setting. Every belief is programming code that determines what gets displayed in your personal reality interface. And just like with any technology, if you don't understand how it works, you can't use it effectively. That's why ancient wisdom suddenly makes perfect sense in the digital age. The metaphors finally match our lived experience. We can finally see what they were pointing to. The invisible connections, the instant communication, the power to create and destroy with pure information. It's not mysterious anymore. It's just how things work. Your awakening begins the moment you realize you're not a victim of circumstances. You're not at the mercy of random events. You're not powerless in a chaotic world. You're a conscious participant in an intelligent system that responds to your input. You always have been. You just forgot how to operate the interface. The Hermetic principles aren't ancient history. They're the operating manual for conscious reality creation. And in our hyper-connected, information-saturated, digitally mediated world, understanding these principles isn't optional anymore. It's essential, because reality is upgrading. And if you don't know how the new version works, you're going to get left behind. Episode 2, Principles in Action, 4,500 characters. Now that you understand we're dealing with an ancient blueprint that perfectly explains our digital reality, let me show you exactly how these principles are playing out in your life right now. Because once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. The first principle is called mentalism. Everything begins in mind. Your thoughts aren't just random electrical activity in your skull. They're creative forces that shape what shows up in your experience. Think about how a viral video starts. Someone has an idea, puts it into form, shares it, and suddenly millions of people are thinking the same thought. That thought becomes a movement, influences behavior, changes culture, shifts reality for everyone involved. Your personal thoughts work the same way. Every relationship you have, every opportunity that appears, every problem you encounter, it all started as a thought pattern in your consciousness. The difference is, most people don't realize they're the original broadcaster. The second principle is vibration. Everything moves, everything vibrates, nothing rests. This isn't mystical language anymore. This is physics. Your emotions are literally frequencies. When you're in a state of fear, you're broadcasting on a different channel than when you're in love or excitement. And here's what's fascinating. You automatically tune into content, people, and experiences that match your current frequency. Ever notice how when you're feeling anxious, you suddenly see disturbing news everywhere? When you're feeling grateful, beautiful synchronicities start appearing? That's not coincidence. That's frequency matching. You're receiving what you're transmitting. The third principle is polarity. Everything has its opposite, and opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Hot and cold are both temperature. Success and failure are both outcomes. Love and hate are both intense emotional engagement. In our digital world, you see this constantly. The same technology that connects us also isolates us. The same platform that spreads truth also spreads lies. The same information that empowers some people overwhelms others. Here's what this means for your life. Every challenge contains its own solution. Every problem has an equal and opposite opportunity embedded within it. When you understand polarity, you stop getting stuck in one extreme and start looking for the other pole of what you're experiencing. The fourth principle is rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. This is why your energy levels fluctuate, why your motivation comes in waves, why certain opportunities appear and disappear in cycles. The key isn't to fight the rhythm, it's to learn to surf it. Look at how information moves online. Something trends, reaches peak attention, then fades away, only to resurface later in a different form. Your personal growth follows the same pattern. You expand, then integrate. You push forward, then pause to process. Understanding rhythm helps you work with natural timing instead of against it. The fifth principle is cause and effect. Every effect has its cause, and every cause has its effect. Nothing happens by chance. In our interconnected world, this principle is visible everywhere. You click on one video, and it influences what you see next. You interact with one person online, and it affects your entire network. You change one belief, and your whole reality shifts to match. The sixth principle is gender. Everything has masculine and feminine principles. The masculine is the force that initiates, decides, acts. The feminine is the force that receives, nurtures, manifests. Both are necessary for creation. An idea without action remains just a thought. Action without proper receptivity creates chaos and burnout. Think about how successful content creators work. They have the masculine energy to consistently produce and share their ideas, but also the feminine receptivity to sense what their audience needs, to adapt and respond to feedback. The seventh principle is correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. Your external world is a perfect reflection of your internal state. Your relationships mirror your relationship with yourself. Your financial situation reflects your beliefs about worthiness and abundance. Your health corresponds to how well you're caring for your inner landscape. This principle explains why changing your circumstances without changing your consciousness rarely works long term. The external will always reorganize itself to match what's happening internally. Here's the practical magic. Once you understand these principles, you can start working with them consciously instead of unconsciously. You can choose your thoughts more deliberately. You can shift your vibration intentionally. You can use polarity to transform problems into opportunities. You can align with natural rhythms instead of fighting them. Technical moment. If what you're hearing right now resonates with you, hit subscribe. This shows that the information is valuable, but understanding the principles is just the beginning. Next, we need to talk about how to actually apply this ancient wisdom in your modern digital life. Because knowing these laws exist is one thing. Using them to create the reality you actually want is something else entirely. All right, now comes the part where ancient wisdom meets your actual daily life. Because knowing these principles intellectually is meaningless unless you can use them to navigate the reality you're living in right now. Let's start with something you probably experience every day: synchronicities. You think about someone and they text you. You need specific information and the perfect video appears in your feed. You're struggling with a decision and you overhear a conversation that gives you exactly the clarity you need. Most people call this coincidence. But once you understand correspondence and vibration, you realize these aren't random events. They're feedback from reality itself. Here's how it actually works. Your consciousness is constantly broadcasting your current state, your questions, your needs. Reality responds by organizing circumstances to deliver what matches your broadcast. The person who texts you was feeling the same frequency you were transmitting. The information that appears was drawn to you because you were in the right receptive state. The overheard conversation happened because you were tuned into the channel where that solution exists. The key is learning to recognize these signals and trust them. When synchronicities increase, it means you're aligned with natural flow. When they decrease, it usually means you're forcing something or operating from fear instead of trust. Now, let's talk about manifestation in the digital age. Every successful content creator, entrepreneur, or influencer is using Hermetic principles, whether they realize it or not. They start with a clear mental image of what they want to create. They maintain consistent vibration through regular action and emotional alignment. They use rhythm by posting consistently and responding to natural cycles of engagement. But here's where most people get stuck. They try to manifest by thinking positive thoughts, while their underlying beliefs are broadcasting the opposite signal. It's like typing one thing into a search engine while your settings are configured for something completely different. The results you get will match your actual settings, not your conscious intentions. To work with these principles effectively, you need to become aware of your default programming. What thoughts run automatically in the background? What emotions do you return to when you're not paying attention? What stories do you tell yourself about why things work or don't work for you? Your subconscious patterns are like your phone's operating system. They're running constantly, determining which apps can open, how much memory is allocated, what notifications you receive. If you want different results, you need to update the underlying programming. Here's a practical approach. Start paying attention to what consistently shows up in your experience, the types of people you attract, the kinds of opportunities that appear, the recurring challenges you face. These patterns aren't happening to you. They're happening through you. Your consciousness is creating them based on your current configuration. Once you see the patterns, you can begin to shift them. But this requires working with all the principles simultaneously. You can't just think different thoughts. You need to embody a different frequency. You can't just take action. You need to align with natural timing. You can't just set goals. You need to become the person who naturally attracts what you're seeking. The most powerful application of Hermetic wisdom in our digital age is learning to curate your information diet as consciously as you curate your physical diet. Every video you watch, every article you read, every conversation you engage in is programming your consciousness. Most people consume information passively, letting algorithms decide what gets installed in their mental operating system. But you can choose to be intentional. You can select content that elevates your frequency rather than depletes it. You can engage with people who inspire growth rather than drain energy. You can feed your mind information that supports the reality you want to create, rather than reinforcing the reality you want to change. Remember the principle of cause and effect. Every click, every view, every interaction is a cause that will generate effects in your experience. The algorithm isn't just showing you what you've liked before. It's shaping what you'll encounter next. Your digital choices are literally programming your future reality. This is why your awakening begins with taking conscious control of your inputs, not just the information you consume, but the thoughts you think, the emotions you cultivate, the beliefs you reinforce through your daily choices. The ancient masters understood that consciousness is the ultimate technology. It's the force that shapes everything else. In our hyper-connected world, this truth is becoming impossible to ignore. Your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs aren't private experiences. They're broadcasting signals that influence the entire network of reality around you. The question isn't whether these principles work. They're always working. The question is whether you're going to use them consciously or unconsciously, whether you're going to be a passive receiver of whatever random content gets delivered to your awareness, or an active creator of your own experience. So, what happens when you actually start living this way? When you stop being a passive observer and become a conscious participant in the creation of your reality, everything changes. And I mean everything. First, you'll notice that the world starts responding to you differently. It's subtle at first. Conversations become more meaningful. People begin sharing things with you they wouldn't normally share. Opportunities appear that seem perfectly timed. Information finds you exactly when you need it. This isn't because reality suddenly became magical. It's because you've learned to operate the interface properly. You're no longer broadcasting confusion and resistance. You're transmitting clarity and receptivity. And reality always mirrors back what you're putting out. You'll start seeing connections everywhere. The book that falls off the shelf contains exactly the insight you needed. The person sitting next to you on the train happens to work in the field you're trying to enter. The podcast that auto-plays addresses the exact question you've been wrestling with. These aren't coincidences. They're the natural result of conscious alignment. But here's what nobody tells you about awakening. It's not always comfortable. When you start seeing how reality actually works, you also start seeing how much of your previous experience was created by unconscious patterns. You realize that many of the things you thought were happening to you were actually happening through you. This can be overwhelming at first. You might feel responsibility for things you didn't know you were creating. You might see how your old beliefs and fears shaped circumstances you wished were different. But this realization is actually your liberation. Because if you created it unconsciously, you can change it consciously. The transformation happens in layers. First, you become aware of the principles. Then you start noticing them in action. Then you begin working with them intentionally. Finally, they become so integrated into how you operate that you're no longer thinking about them. You're simply living them. At this stage, your life starts flowing with an ease that seems impossible to people still operating from the old paradigm. Not because you don't face challenges, but because you understand how to work with them instead of against them. You know how to shift your frequency when you're stuck. You recognize when you're fighting natural rhythm and need to adjust your timing. You can sense when you're trying to force outcomes instead of allowing them to emerge. Most importantly, you stop seeing yourself as separate from the reality you're experiencing. You understand that your consciousness and the world around you are part of the same interconnected system. What changes you changes everything. What heals in you heals in the collective. What you become available for becomes available to others. This is why your awakening matters beyond just your personal life. When you start operating from Hermetic principles, you become a point of coherence in the collective field. You demonstrate that another way of being is possible. You show others that they don't have to be victims of circumstances or prisoners of conditioning. People around you will notice something different, even if they can't name what it is. Your presence will become calming. Your perspective will offer clarity where others see confusion. Your energy will inspire possibility where others feel stuck. And here's the beautiful part. The more you embody these principles, the more reality supports your growth. Resources appear, teachers arrive, doors open. Not because you're special, but because you've learned to harmonize with the natural intelligence that's always been operating beneath the surface of things. Your awakening isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process of remembering who you actually are and how reality actually works. It's a return to the wisdom that's been available all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting for humanity to develop the language and technology to understand it clearly. In our digital age, this ancient wisdom isn't just relevant, it's essential. Because we're living in a time when the power to create and destroy with pure information has never been greater. Understanding how consciousness shapes reality isn't optional anymore. It's necessary for navigating what's coming. You're not just awakening for yourself. You're awakening for everyone whose life you'll touch, everyone who will witness what becomes possible when someone remembers how to work with the fundamental laws of existence. If this video has shifted something in you, write in the comments, "I am the observer and the observed." Write this as your promise to remember. Nobody